So let's move on. So again, back to this graph about Singapore's demographics. So we have got the baby boomers just now, and then a little bit older than the baby boomers would be the silent generation. That generation sort of lived through the Second World War. And then after the baby boomers, it is the Generation X. And then even younger than Generation X would be Gen Y or Millennials. And then Gen Y or Millennials are even younger than them, Gen Z. So you see from the graph, Gen Z. And after Gen Z, which is the children who are now between 0 and 9 years of age, you see that the graph falls off pretty quickly. And you see the people who are in the baby boomer generation in the next 20 years, as they pass on and they try to sell the properties, it is the Gen Z and the people who are 0 to 9 years old, in 20 years' time, they are the ones buying the properties. So based on this graph, it would look like there would be a lot more resale flats and private residences than there would be buyers for this. Just take a while to look through. I mean, of course, it takes a while for you to get used to thinking through some of these numbers and looking ahead 5 years, 10 years, or even 20 years.
So does that mean that actually there will be more and more properties that is getting older, maybe those that is actually in the 1940s, built on 1950s, right now because they're already baby boomers, they're in the midst of demise or probably retirement and stuff like that. And a lot of youngsters, they don't want to buy those. They rather go for like single scheme and all that. So what's going to happen to all this property? Are they going to sell back? That's the reason why the government came up with CPF board. They came up with like buyback scheme kind of thing. Is that what is facing? What are we facing right now in Singapore?
Yes. So the older flats are. So in fact, it has become a bit of a two-tier market. Those HDB flats that are between 5 to 15 years of age are still able to command relatively high resale prices, but flats that are at 40 years or 50 years of age, partly also because there's some loan restrictions for younger buyers, there's some CPF use restriction for the younger buyers. So in general, the demand for them, other than the fact that they have depreciated in their lease, there are fewer buyers. Later on, I'll be showing a graph that would explain this a little bit more. But just based on this chart, look at the home ownership. 3-room flats, 4-room flats, and 5-room flats, they are all above 90%. They are about 95% homeowners, owner-occupied. And so the people who are at the 65, 75, 85 years age, 90% of them own their own homes. And like I said, right now, our annual births is 30,000, annual number of deaths about 22,000. By the year 2030, there will be about 30,000 passing away each year. And so how many of these people might have to then transfer the property to the children? Failing, if the children already own HDB flats, they are unable to transfer, then it would have to come out to the resale market. So any plans for the inheritance of these units? How many units will actually be inherited instead of the children putting it out into the resale market to sell it so that they can share the cash proceeds?
Yeah.
So we have got to be cognizant that the numbers of this resale, especially the older HDB resale flats, will be increasing in future.
So I just have this question. Is it better thing for me? Okay, assume, I don't mind disclosing, a single woman like me, okay? If I really want to buy like a property, should I just go for like single scheme, or should I just go for those like in their like 40s, 50s? There are a lot of people are like trying to sell it out but can't really fetch a good price. And I just take that as part of my like either rental income or my own use and things like that.
I would say that if you are planning to buy it as an investment, then you are going to be going against this demographics trend. And nobody can reverse the cost of aging, right?
Yeah.
And because we can't reverse the cost of aging, if you're buying a property as an investment thinking that you can collect rental income, but then you look at the shrinking numbers of Generation Z, as well as what's to come, you can actually already from the graph see that in 20 years' time, the total number of new young families formed who are coming into the market to buy real estate will be much smaller as compared to the number of people who might be passing away and then having to release their property in the second-hand market.
Understood.
Right? And then so now we are at this chart where just now you asked the question about the different age cohorts of the HDB flats. Today, look at the green box. The flats that were completed in 1970s and 1980s, there are 550,000 flats.
Wow.
That are more than 30 years old, because those that are built in 1980s, on average, they are about 35 years of age. Those that are built in 1970s, on average, they are 45 years of age. And by the year 2030, where
10 years later,
the number of deaths might equal to the number of new babies born. In fact, there will be these 550,000 HDB flats will be all of them will be more than 40 years of age. And the 40 years of age mark is important, so hold on to that thought. Later on, I'll show you the depreciation graph. That 40 years of age mark is important milestone, and is an important milestone because the depreciation goes faster after that. Then you look at the extreme left-hand side of the graph, which is 1960s HDB flats. At that time, Singapore was nation building. The British started building some flats for us under SIT. Subsequently, it became HDB. And a lot of these flats, in fact, our HDB new towns then were brickworks, Queenstown, around Tiong Bahru, around Bukit Merah. A lot of these flats have been demolished because of poorer construction material. Maybe some of them were still using lead pipes, or there was some asbestos inside. Some of them are conserved, such as those in Tiong Bahru. But the 1960s flats are mainly that 117,000 of them, they are just reduced to a handful, maybe a couple of thousand left. Most of them have been demolished or searched, unblocked, and then built into new flats already. So we are now more concerned about the very huge 550,000 that is from the 1970s, 1980s. 1970s, you can consider, for example, Toa Payoh, Lorong 1, Lorong 4. 1980s flats, for example, you can think about Circuit Road, Aljunied, you can think about Marine Parade. These are the 1980s flats. So that's why I say there is a bit of a split market. This bunch of older flats, valuations are hardly climbing, even though we now seem to be in a hot market. The record-breaking prices, those HDB flats are from the last completed in 5 years to 15 years ago.
Yeah, like Bishan, right?
Some of the Bishan or some, for example, Pinnacle and Duxton. Yeah, correct. So there's a bit of a disjoint. The market is starting to widen up. Okay. So based on forecasts, I worked this together with a team of very bright SMU students as a side project. We did the forecast, we ran the numbers over a couple of months, and we then estimated in the year 2030, for example, the yellow bar in the middle. In the year 2030, how many HDB flats would come into the market as a result of the death of the second owner? Because when one of the two old couple, the first of the two old couple passes away, the second of the couple retains ownership of the flat. It is only when the second of the couple passes away that the flat would then come out into the resale market. If the children are unable to inherit or unwilling to inherit the flat, they would then sell it in the second-hand market, and then they would split the proceeds of the sale. So our estimate on the low end is that there will be 3,400 units that will be for sale, due to the passing away of the second owner. At the top end, we estimate there will be 8,000 units. Now, just as a sense of proportion, the annual resale transactions of HDB flats is about between 20 to 25,000, so let's take it as 23,000. And even a 3,400 resale units due to the passing away of the second owner, that is about 15% of the 23,000 volume of resale HDB flats a year. It will add on to the resale price pressure downwards. So this is just one example. Plus, these flats are getting older. So by the year 2030, we will be having 550,000 flats that are more than 40 years of age. We will be having 200,000 flats that are in fact older than 50 years. So can the value sustain, be maintained flat, or even climb? And for the people who are retiring in the next 10 to 15 years, what does that mean for the nest egg? Because most of their hard-earned money has been put into CPF, and from CPF they then use it to fund their housing. And the depreciation, the lease depreciates every year. The decline in value accelerates as the flat goes past its 40-year age. So your flats will depreciate to zero at 99 years, so that's okay because it's a 99-year lease that we took from HDB. But the depreciation starts to accelerate more beyond the 40 years age because of HDB loan and CPF payment restrictions for younger people who want to buy some of these old flats. So meaning they have got to fork out more cash. Plus, loans are not available for elderly people who are above 65 years. So in fact, if they wanted to downgrade to an old flat, they would also have to take out a lot of cash to buy the down flat. So this together means that these restrictions together speed up the rate of depreciation, even though there is a mathematical 1 upon 99 year sort of depreciation on the flat. So this is a simulation of a flat in Marine Parade. And we did this simulation in the year 2017 together with a couple of very bright students from NUS Real Estate Department. We looked at the flat that was transacted in 2017 at 860,000 in Marine Parade. And as it ages, its lease became less and less. Fewer and fewer people in the market would be able to buy it without taking out a lot more cash because of restrictions on CPF usage and restrictions on home loans. And therefore, it is not just the reduction in the total number of years that you can use the property, the HDB flat, it is compounded. The situation is compounded by the fact that many people who wish to buy these old flats would have to take out more cash, take out less loan, and use less CPF. So that's why the curve starts to drop pretty sharply. So, after giving you a lot of the macro information, how would Mr. and Mrs. Lim make a decision on their retirement? So option one is that was presented to them. They can sell their current flat and rent a 3-room flat around the Hougang area at roughly $2,000 a month. Option two, which is the option that they wanted initially, was to sell their flat and downsize by purchasing a 3-room flat. So with these two options, how much cash do they need? Their monthly expense will be about $3,700 a month because we added on living expenses for Mr. and Mrs. Lim to the rental And don't forget that they are actually thinking about retiring, meaning both of them will not have any more income. So $2,000 of rent plus monthly $1,700 to support their utilities bills, their food, their telephone bills, for example. So with this $3,700 a month and the cash that they have from selling the property, as well as the payment of the CPF full retirement sum every month now, Mrs. Lim will be getting her monthly check from CPF. They can actually support themselves for 9 years, roughly. And that would take them to the age of about 74 or 75 years old. So then they will be out of cash. And in all likelihood, they are able to live longer than this age. So the future is a little bit uncertain using option 1. Option 2, which is the option that they prefer, sell and downsize. So they'll buy another flat. Mrs. Lim's full retirement sum from CPF, she can cut it by half to pay for the flat. But then her retirement payout every month would be reduced to about $800. So in this example of selling and downsizing, they are still then an owner of a 3-room HDB. They'll have to pay S&CC charges, annual property taxes, and in this scenario, they have actually used up their cash savings. So meaning Mrs. Lim has to remain employed. Just rewinding back to show you, the cash from the sale is $280,000. She can take out some money from her CPF full retirement sum account. She reduces her full retirement sum to the basic retirement sum, and she would have used up most of her cash. And so she would have to continue being employed after the age of 65. So meaning that actually in both option 1 and option 2, they do not have the luxury of being able to fall sick or that they are able to take a holiday. Of course, unless both children continue to support them as well. So there are, of course, a few other options that we have explored with Mr. and Mrs. Lim, but those were not so preferred. So I highlighted options 1 and 2. But basically, we need to think through this case, think about our relatives or our older relatives, or think about our older cousins and friends. We actually have to start having a conversation with everybody who is moving towards the retirement age or just past their retirement age to consider what is wealth transfer of their properties and assets. So just to sum up, in conclusion, there's an increasing proportion of HDB flats which have less than 60 years of lease, which are more than 39 years old, starting from the 99 years. Whatever is your wealth group, the high home ownership situation in Singapore demands that we actually have to start planning our wealth transfer. Even if you just have a 3-room flat, a modest 3 and 4-room flat, you have to start thinking about it, because you cannot just pass it to your children easily, especially because your children also own their own flats. Increasing restrictions on the ownership of aging flats and their depreciating values means that we should start discussing and planning even earlier. So for those of us who in fact have good support from our children and our children's families, in fact there is the other option of selling out and moving in with the children to help take care of the grandchildren, for example. So what can we do? Have an open discussion with the loved ones, with our relatives. Now that we are all stuck at home It's good to bring up these discussions at home. In the next festive season, if you meet up with your family members again when the COVID restrictions are lifted, when we are back to meeting with our relatives, start up a discussion. Discuss what you think. Just get the discussion going. It helps. And if you still find it daunting, please engage a trustworthy property agent together with an estate planning specialist and a financial advisor, such that you can have a more well-considered and balanced discussion. You consider it from all fronts. Your wealth, your retirement cash flow needs, plus what is the possible depreciation of your HDB flat or your private property.
I understand that if you actually have a private property and if it's either fully paid off or fully privatized type, right, you can actually pledge it to the bank using a financial instrument called the Universal Life, which is part of insurance to help you do legacy planning and all that, right?
Okay, for those of us who have got private properties that are a little bit higher in value, the higher the value of your property, the more options you would have. In fact, one of the options for HDB flats would be to sell back 15 or 20 years of the lease to HDB. HDB would give you some cash such that you can enjoy your retirement a little bit more rather than to eat biscuits and have Milo for some meals of the week, right? There are various options, but it depends on your lifestyle, it depends on your children, your support group, and also, of course, it also depends on your health. Yeah. So, do keep in touch. I've got a Telegram channel where I update market updates. It is a Telegram group called Khoo Swee Yong Real Estate, and I have also got a YouTube channel called Khoo Swee Yong Real Estate. Find me there and then subscribe, and you can follow some of my comments about the real estate market, including commercial properties, industrial properties, and so on.